It's been a little over 18 months since Red Dead Redemption 2 dropped, and no, in case you were wondering, I'm still not over everything that happened in that final act. Spoilers ahead, obviously, but dear God, Arthur and Buell, you broke my damn heart. Honestly, in my opinion, Red Dead 2 is the best video game ever released, and while hopping into the glitchy mess that is Red Dead Online does fill that rootin' tootin' itch, it's a serious medical condition, don't joke about it, I still find myself hankering for a story as grand and as ambitious as the one seen in Rockstar's 2018 classic. By all accounts, it seems a dead cert that Rockstar's next big thing will be GTA 6, and I'm obviously very excited. That said, I still kinda want another Red Dead already because I'm really greedy. And as it transpires, we here at WhatCulture Gaming have a lot of ideas of what could make the perfect Red Dead threequel. So, I'm Ewan, this is WhatCulture Gaming, and here are 10 ways Rockstar can make the perfect Red Dead Redemption 3. Number 10. Refined combat. This is definitely the most technical of the 10 entries on this list, but it bears talking about. One of the few legitimate criticisms levied at the Western prequel was the clunky, outdated nature of combat. Now, this isn't a criticism of the actual gunplay. I think Red Dead's up there with the very best when it comes to that feeling of owning every shot and nailing the slow pace of firefights in the Old West. It's more to do with the movement and cover systems. Talk it up to Rockstar's classic jank, but there is nothing more frustrating than tapping R1 to get into cover, only for your character to just do this. It is so annoying, so basically just add more depth to the combat and fix the cover. Number 9. Give us a reason to be bad. Why would you play as a bad guy in Red Dead Redemption 2? There's really only one answer, because you can. You don't get anything for making the bad choices. Sure, you may come away with monetary compensation here and there, but there's no real in-world positive to being a fiend, and Arthur Morgan is clearly meant to be played as an honourable man. With all that said, it would be nice to see Red Dead Redemption 3 explore the quote-unquote positives of being truly merciless, and that could be a perfect fit for a certain setting, which I'll get to later. People may look the other way when you commit crimes. Shopkeepers could either give you stuff for free or flee their businesses in terror at the sheer sight of you, leaving you to thin their inventory at your leisure. Other outlaws might steer clear of you out of respect and fear, and local cutthroat businessmen and politicians might be more inclined to hire you for a high-paying job, befitting of those with low moral character. Whatever the case may be, it would be nice to see some real pros to being a bad guy in the next Red Dead. Number 8. Bring back single-player DLC. The first Red Dead Redemption did something the second still hasn't and gave us a standalone single-player DLC story. Undead Nightmare just shouldn't have worked. Upon announcement, its goofy, light-hearted, pulpy tone didn't really seem to fit with the realistic, down-to-earth, emotionally mature narrative of the main game. It was a peculiar pitch. Despite, or perhaps because of this peculiarity, Undead Nightmare went on to record massive sales and overwhelmingly positive reviews, with many considering it to be among the best DLCs ever released. The second game also had its fair share of supernatural elements. We saw a werewolf, a vampire, a Bigfoot skeleton, a time traveler, a witch's cauldron, a pagan ritual site, the night folk, the goddamn night folk, and more than a couple of UFOs too. There's plenty there to work with, and the absence of a fun pulpy DLC is one of the greatest disappointments, one of the only disappointments, but still one of the greatest, of Red Dead Redemption 2. Look, I get that GTA Online is a big money maker, and Red Dead Online could even be the same with more support which it desperately needs, but it's no substitute for a bona fide single-player add-on, either supernatural in nature or not. Number 7. The early days of the LINDE gang. If we keep with the trajectory of the last two games, we'll go further back in time and see the LINDE gang in their heyday, as opposed to them on their last leg with their backs against the wall. We could see why people feared them far and wide, and we could see why Arthur and John became so deeply infatuated with the ideas that Dutch espoused. But what do we know about the history of the LINDE gang? Well, we know that in the 1870s, Dutch and Hosea tried to rob each other, sparking a lifelong friendship. In 1877, they recruited a 14-year-old Arthur Morgan. In 1885, they rescued a 12-year-old John Marston from being lynched in Illinois. 2 years later, the gang carried out its first major robbery. At some point, they also had a truce with the O'Driscoll gang, but that peace was broken when Dutch killed Colm's brother. In 1898, the gang moved from Montana to West Elizabeth, where they would ultimately rob a ferry in the ill-fated Blackwater Massacre of 1899. And that's really it. There's a lot to explore, and it would be fascinating to see Dutch as an ideologue, and Arthur as his young zealous devotee. Number 6. Classic Western settings. When the average person hears the word Western, it generally conjures up images of sun-soaked deserts, like those you may find in New Mexico and Arizona, giant stone spires like Monument Valley, and desolate, lawless towns with dusty streets and a saloon with a couple of swinging doors, like Tombstone or Dodge City. Admittedly, this is an incredibly narrow and almost reductionist view of westerns. A western just doesn't have to be deserts. It can be towering mountains, open ranges, thick forests, booming towns, sprawling plains, and bottomless canyons. The Red Dead Redemption games have covered a lot of the western biomes already. All that said, it would be nice to see that traditional western iconography weaved in more and more. We already had some of it in the first game where we had towns like Tumbleweed and Armadillo, but it would be interesting to go further west, exploring places inspired by classic western landmarks such as Carlsbad Caverns, Antelope Canyon, Zion Nation Park, Mesa Verde, and the Grand Canyon. We can also see places that are still relative strongholds of Native American culture, and speaking of, number 5, more Native Americans. This one has still yet to be fully explored in the series, and that's a real shame. The first game had but a handful of native characters, the most prominent of which was the short-lived, ill-fated informant Nastas. The others were mostly nameless guns in Dutch's new gang. They played a larger role in the second game, but only towards the back end. The war between the US government and the Wapiti tribe was pivotal to the game's third act, and the story even touched upon the real horror of the reservations as the US expanded westward and embarked on its own genocide. Even then, though, we didn't really get a sense of Wapiti culture. It would be fascinating to explore what it meant to be a Native American at the height of the American West. But what could they explore? Well, they could draw inspiration from the Wounded Knee Massacre of 1890, or perhaps the preceding Great Sioux War of 1876. Maybe Rockstar could take some cues from the Apache Wars too, which raged from 1881 to 1886, and saw the US Army going head-to-head with various bands of Apache warriors and other allied tribes. US history is full of these dark chapters, and Rockstar would do well to explore them in Red Dead 3. Number 4. Lean into social realities. Believe it or not, neither Red Dead 1 or 2 are quote-unquote true westerns. Instead, they're what's called revisionist westerns, or anti-westerns. Revisionist westerns place a stronger focus on moral ambiguity, while also casting more light on non-traditional western protagonists, such as American Indians, women, and African Americans. They also focus on the darker parts of American history, the things the US has chosen to forget or omit, the atrocities and the morally reprehensible actions of the heroes that would star in the old cavalry westerns of the 50s and 60s, mostly played by John Wayne. Red Dead Redemption 3 would do well to explore these things. Along with the aforementioned persecution of American Indians, they could also draw upon the reality that black men made up about a third of all cowboys on the open range, but were often excluded from drinking in saloons due to segregation. The game could also explore how the Chinese were often targets of racist vitriol, with Los Angeles' Chinese Massacre of 1871 being but one prominent example. The first 2 games have already done this, but let's maybe feature a new kind of protagonist this time around, someone more along the lines of Charles or Sadie from the last game. Number 3. New cities. This one is a no-brainer, but it's always worth mentioning all the same. Rockstar have steered clear of using actual cities, instead imbuing their fictional locales with homages to real places. Saint Denis was very clearly inspired by New Orleans, Armadillo is an analogue for traditional western desert towns like Tombstone, and Valentine is reminiscent of livestock towns like Cheyenne. So with that in mind, what real-world cities may Red Dead 3 take inspiration from? Since Marston was rescued from Illinois homesteaders, perhaps the game could model its obligatory metropolis after Chicago. Alternatively, if they wanted to head further west, they could take cues from San Francisco, known then as the Paris of the West, which exploded in population after a gold rush in 1848. Other cities include Denver, Colorado, home to lavish opera houses, luxury hotels, and real-world outlaw crime bosses like Soapy Smith. Santa Fe, New Mexico, known for its elaborate pueblos and an imposing Spanish cathedral, or perhaps most promising of all, Deadwood, South Dakota, which hosted famous Old West figures from both sides of the law. Number 2. The Golden Age of Outlaws. Both games featured the American West on its last leg. The first saw John Marston actively hunting down and exterminating the vestiges of the West's violent, lawless past, only to then be exterminated himself, and the second showed us a bit more of that lawlessness. But even then, the gang was backed up against a wall, and they were forced to stare down the barrel at the imminent end of their way of life, just like The Wild Bunch, which you should all go and watch. Those themes were poignant and made for two of the most emotionally rich video game stories ever told, but wouldn't it be fun to see the gang running wild in their heyday? To see them as wide-eyed bandits fighting for a philosophy they believe in, back when they actually thought it could work. Again, that may work against Red Dead's revisionist or anti-Western leanings, but there's a way to do it and do it right. America after the Civil War proved fertile ground for outlaws, with the likes of Jesse James and Billy the Kid both forming gangs as the US found itself looking westward. Already, it's easy to see how you could fit the Vandalin gang in that time period, but there may be another protagonist we could focus on instead to really capitalize on that setting. And number 1, Landon Ricketts. Yup, the man, the mustache, the legend himself. If we can't get a young Dutch and Arthur, or an altogether new story, perhaps we could explore the early days of the greatest Sam Elliott stand-in in the history of gaming. A young Landon Ricketts story offers us a lot of possibilities. He was a gunslinger in the golden age of outlaws. His story could explore social stratification, and we could see a redemptive arc where he turns away from a life of crime and follows a more honorable path, ultimately fighting on the side of the police during the Blackwater Massacre of 1899, before retiring to Mexico after a shootout in California. Granted, this probably won't happen, as his voice actor Ross Hagen passed away in 2011. In fact, Mount Hagen in Red Dead 2 was named after him, and though Rockstar could just as easily cast a different voice actor, they may want to let his legacy rest in peace. But if they wanted to place Red Dead Redemption 3's focus on a pre-existing character, they could do a lot worse than old Landon Ricketts, who fans dearly love and would absolutely enjoy a game centered around. And yeah, that was our list on how to make the perfect sequel to Red Dead Redemption 2. Would you like to see Red Dead move further into the past, or do you think the franchise could exist in a different setting, say maybe the 1920s? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and please don't forget to like, share and subscribe, and to hit the notification bell so you never miss another video going forward. You can find more latest articles like this at whatculture.com/gaming, and you can find more of me on Twitter at @UMoonsthings. That's all for now though, have a great day, and I'll see you next time. Bye!